Good evening, House of Clergy. While everyone piles in from the waiting room, Kay is just going to be letting everyone in. I'll just go through a few quick notices before I hand over to the Bishop of Grantham, who's going to start us in prayer. He is stationary today. During the House of Laity elections, he was in a lay-by on the M1, so we're very grateful to have him in his own office. You will have noticed when you came into the meeting, there was a notification to say that it's being recorded. It will be available tomorrow on the website. There's currently about 18 of us. We might get a few more, but we have had quite a few views of the House of Laity video, and I expect that it will be the same. So we will go through the motions, do the same thing, and then know that we'll hopefully reach some more people over the next few days on the website. You'll notice that your microphone has been muted. You will be prompted to unmute if at any point if you're asked to speak, but due to the size of the meeting and because we've got quite a lot to get through, if you could keep yourself on mute unless you're asked to unmute, that would be great. Any candidates in the meeting, could you make sure that your name, your Zoom name is set to your full name? You should be able to rename yourself in the More button, but if you're struggling at all, do send Kay a message and she'll be able to do that for you. Likewise, if you're having any technical issues, do send Kay a message in the chat and she'll be able to sort that out for you. This meeting is an opportunity for the House to hear the opinions of our candidates on the matters that have been chosen by the electorate. But because we don't really have the time this evening for debate, we have disabled the chat function apart from to the host and co-host. There is opportunity after the meeting, do be in touch with the candidates directly if you've got any follow-up questions. Most of their details are available on their electoral addresses, but if you need anything else, then do let me know. Right, before I witter on any further, I'm going to hand over to Bishop Nicholas, who's going to open the meeting in prayer for us.
Thank you, Helen. And as I said last week, thank you, everyone, to those of you who are standing. Thank you for being willing to do so. It's a very important role that you are putting yourselves forward to. And thank you, everyone, for being present to ask questions or simply to observe. So may we pray in the power of the Spirit, in union with Christ, to God the Father. Dear Lord, as we pray continually for your world, so we remember its peoples, their needs and their joys. But today, gracious Lord, we pray especially for the church universal, for the church in this land, in its different denominations, for the Church of England, and for the family of parishes, chaplaincies, schools and communities that is the Diocese of Lincoln. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We pray for all who are standing for election to General Synod, ordained and laid together across the nation, and for our own candidates in Lincoln. Thank you, dear Lord, for their willingness to serve. Grant to all who are standing for election your wisdom, your grace, and your joy in the gospel. And assist those who will be casting their vote over the next days to make wise choices that honour you and your coming kingdom. And so let us pray for the coming of the kingdom in the words that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. for thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. I wish you all a very good evening.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you for that, for setting the scene for us as well. I appreciate it. Before we make a start, I'm just going to confirm to everyone present, including the candidates, how this will work. I am getting messages from Philip Brent, who's one of our candidates this evening. He is on holiday with questionable broadband in his bed and breakfast. And I think he's going to be, he said he's being kicked out regularly. So I think he's going to keep attempting, but we'll do what we can as he comes in and out of the meeting, I think. Both for the introductions section, what we're going to do first, and also for the chosen questions this evening, the order that each of the candidates will be called has been agreed in advance with a random order generator. The candidates are not aware of the order that they're going to be asked to speak, and they've not had pre-sight of the questions. Each candidate will be given an equal opportunity to speak on each issue, and I'll confirm when I read out the question, and I'll display it on the screen, how long the speech limit is for each question. I'll give a 10-second warning at the end of that as well. And because we've got so much to get through tonight, if you are still speaking at the end of the speech limit, you may be unceremoniously muted by Kay, so you have been warned. When we get to the questions portion, as I said, I will display them on the screen at the beginning before I call the first candidate. I'll not reshare that question in between candidates, so I've asked the candidates to note down the questions as we go along. We've had a good response from the pre-submitted questions, so we won't have time for any follow-up questions at the end of the meeting. And for anyone who hasn't already seen them, all of the electoral addresses for all of the candidates are available both through the Civica election portal and also on the General Synod page of the website, where the recording of this hustings will be placed as well. Right, thanks for bearing with me on that. Everybody's ready, we'll make a start. We've given the candidates 2.5 minutes for their introductions each. First I was going to call Philip Brent, but I don't think he has come back into oh, Philip, are you with us, Philip?
Yes, I am.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we'll do our best. We have 2.5 minutes for you. If we lose you, we know what's happened. When you're ready, please take it away.
Well, I apologise that I have got a poor broadband being on holiday, and also for my attire, I would normally be in my collar, but there you go. I have been in the diocese for 22 years as a priest, and that's after 25 years I've been ordained. And this is the diocese of my birth. I feel very passionate about the diocese, and I feel very passionate about the area I am currently in, which is North Lincolnshire. Scunthorpe is an area of the diocese that is often forgotten politically and spiritually. People don't seem to know what to do with it. So to actually try and give a voice to North Lincolnshire, I think I am the only candidate from representing the north of the diocese, actually. It's quite something. It's quite important, because those people really do need to be heard and to be understood. I also feel very strongly that the parish is the focal point of our ministry as a diocese, and I think as a Church of England. And I am standing under the banner of Save the Parish, which many of you may have heard about. And there are 5 real clear points that we want to address: to support the archbishops in keeping their pledge to support the parish as the best means of evangelism; to put the front line first, ensuring that resources are properly belonged to and are generated in the parishes are there for the parish; to ensure that law and projects which are initiated at the centre do not break down the parochial system; to ensure that there is a prioritisation of good spending on good theological education, and also that there should be a dialogue between church and state to protect and preserve the historical parish buildings. That's really key, because parish buildings are sucking the life out of PCCs and out of clergy in terms of time and energy and mission and evangelism. I think if we can do that, we can then look at the fact that the church has a problem with lack of inclusivity, with inherent racism within the church, with misogyny, and with not listening to and supporting the LGBTQIA community. And so I would hope that we can do that by supporting one another. Also, the church has a problem with safeguarding breaches.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Philip. I'm afraid we're out of time there. I do apologise. I've remuted myself. Next, I'm going to call Sonja Baron to speak. So, Sonja, you have 2.5 minutes also. When you're ready, please take it away. You are still on mute. There you are.
Good evening and thank you. Just a few things to highlight from my election address. First, I am standing for General Synod because I believe it should reflect the diversity of the church. I see myself as slightly outside the mould among clergy in Lincoln Diocese. I'm Black for a start, brought up as a Pentecostal, been a missionary in Africa, and received a lay call to ordained ministry. I've experienced urban, suburban, and rural life, and I like to think that these diverse experiences will help me represent and demonstrate the variety that is the Church of England. I've never been on General Synod, but I've had plenty to do with it over the years through helping the church come to grips with racial justice issues. I believe in that passionately, but it isn't what defines me. I'd much rather be defined by the words of the Declaration of Assent, by my affirmation of this faith the church is called upon to proclaim afresh in each generation. Our wonderful, time-honored parish system gives us a Christian presence in every community. I want to see our parishes engage effectively in mission without unnecessarily burdensome legislation. I want to see our clergy flourishing and their well-being given priority, which I hope our time together to change together agenda will begin to address. We're a broad church, as we know. That brings its frustrations, but to me, it's a real source of strength. It embraces all sorts of people in terms of culture, race, educational background, churchmanship, providing a space for all. As the early church grew, and so as we share and are today the gospel, we need to do so in ways that resonate with different groups. 8 a.m. BCP, Mossy Church, Forest Church, outdoors. I hope others as well. In my personal journey of faith, perhaps the most important lesson I've learned is to be open to difference and willing to listen. Given the divisive and challenging issues that we face, it's vital that we listen to and understand the other to bring as many as possible we can into the love of
Thank
Jesus
you, Sonja.
Christ.
Thank you. And next I'm going to call Aaron Beasley. Speak, Aaron, when you're ready. 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you. So I'm Aaron Beasley. I'm in the south of the diocese in Uffington, very close to Stamford, between markets, towns, rural at the same time, not rural. I am being distracted by what I have been called to do, and I listen to Nehemiah's words saying focus on the job. Now, I don't want to build a wall around me, but I want to look after parish ministry. That's the job I was called to do. So I now see that I need to broaden my focus to help and work with the national church to make sure that the job I was called to do, that parish priests have been called to do, does not change beyond recognition. I want to be on hand to help those in need that I've been sent to serve amongst and with. I need the capacity to visit without being distracted, and people won't ask lay or ordained people to come into their houses to help them unless we build bridges with them. People will not follow Jesus unless they have role models, because if they read about us in the papers, they get a tarnished picture. Perception is truth, and we need to change those perceptions. I'm setting out to offer all the things that we might expect a parish clergy person to do, to offer services to make Christ known to the broken, to heal them, to create a desire to come and see more often. And it takes a lot of time to do this, especially when over time things have been eroded and forgotten. Now, prior to ordination, I worked in industry for 20 years, so I have a bag full of skills and understanding of the ways of management and leadership, and we talk about these a lot in the church, but I don't see the national church applying them in ways that will help us change. So, although recently ordained and committed to parish life, I want to get involved to protect the parish system and to grow locally.
Thank you, Aaron. And next I'm going to call Gavin Kirk to speak, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gavin Kirk. I am the Archdeacon of Lincoln, and as of the day before yesterday, I think I'm also acting Archdeacon of Stowe and Lindsey, which is daunting and thrilling. And I'm going to, day after tomorrow, for my first excursion to Grimsby in that role, and I'm looking forward to finding out much more about life in there. I grew up in the county, and so Lincolnshire is very deep in my roots and in my heart, and I have quite a lot of experience of life in this county. I've served in the diocese since 2003, and I have relished almost every moment of it. I've been on the General Synod before, and it's an extraordinary institution. It takes quite a while to get used to it. There's an art even in being called to speak. It's not quite as straightforward as you think. And I reckon through the various ways that I've been involved in General Synod, and I've listed those on my Hustings address, I have developed quite a good sense of that. When I try to speak, I generally get called. I think the biggest challenge facing us at the moment is the vast amounts of money that the church commissioners are sitting on and seem completely unwilling or disinclined to release for the sake of the ordinary parishes in the Church of England. And the only institution that can do anything about that is the General Synod. So I'm hoping, if you elect me, to bring a diocesan motion and then to General Synod in order to force the church commissioners to reevaluate how they spend their money. I also want us to seek to get some government help in our buildings, because maintaining buildings is one of the biggest challenges facing the church in rural areas. Buildings and clergy are not mission limiting factors, but they are the things that take up so much time and enthusiasm, with which we could do with a pretty big wodge of help, frankly. So that is what I am standing for, and I we'll be very pleased to answer any further questions.
Thank you. And next I'm going to call Jim Presswood, when you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening. Jim Presswood. So I've been in the diocese now 7 years, down at St Swithin's, Lincoln, one of the SDF resource churches. Also more latterly priest in charge in the West End, down St Faith's Church, and loving doing that. A very different sort of churchmanship and feel, very local parish. So really enjoying the contrast between the two different churches and the different opportunities and challenges that they bring, the way that they inform the ministry across the two, one influencing the other and causing us to rethink both ends of the spectrum. Before that, I was down in Finsbury Park in London, working for a group of 3 churches there, but my heart is in the north. I'm a Yorkshire man originally, so Lincolnshire is not too far away, and lots we share in common. Part of the reason I'm standing for General Synod is, firstly, I believe in the stated priorities of evangelism, witness, prayer, and the renewal of religious life and of reconciliation, and the need for those to be the focus of what brings us together. unites us, and be the things that we're known as standing for, as opposed to, as previous people have said, so often being defined by what we stand against and what we disagree over. I may be mistaken, but I don't think it would normally be assumed that someone of my church type would be chomping at the bit to be elected to General Synod. But when I heard that National Church covers your expenses and pays for your lodgings, I thought it was a good cheap way to get a break from parish life. Not really, obviously. I'm keen to bring that voice from the flavour of churches I've been a part of into that debate and into that setting. Keen to bring my voice, but actually I'm also keen just to bring my ears and my eyes too. I did my training at St. Mellitus and really benefited from the breadth of church traditions there. Like I said, I've really enjoyed being at St. Faith's, and just the impact that has had on my formation, recognising that one of the greatest gifts we have is the breadth of the Anglican Church and the way that we can inform one another and grow one another. And so often is the case that those voices that shout the loudest aren't the only ones with something to say worth listening to. So being able to bring out and listen to some of those voices is important to me. And then I think for me, a background in youth work, we have a significant number under the age of 30 in the church. So bringing something of that voice.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. Sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there. We're at the end of your 2.5 minutes. And then next we have Martin Taylor. Martin, when you're ready.
Great, thanks everyone. Hi, I've been in Lincoln Diocese 25 years, and that is all at the same parish, St George's, as cure, as associate rector and rector. I'm now the rural dean of Stamford, and in 2019 we also were made an SDF resource church. So really invested in the future of Lincoln Diocese and wanted to see it flourish and to see churches renewed and revitalised. And to that extent, of course, I'm a great believer in the parish. I've been in the same parish for 25 years. My dad did 2 stints as a priest for 14 years and 27 years. So I understand the value of parish ministry and seeking to revitalise and refresh parishes that we're going to seek to try and help. I'm also standing for re-election like Gavin, and I completely concur with Gavin that it takes time to get up to speed with what goes on General Synod. And how the protocols and those kinds of things. So I hope that I would bring, if you re-elect me, that experience and be up and running from the start. I've also been on the Archbishop's Finance Committee. I was elected from General Synod to the Archbishop's Finance Committee. And that's given me a breadth, a view of the kind of the economy of the whole Church of England and where Lincoln fits into the whole scheme of things. And you bring things back to the diocese, you can have conversations in private and say, look, I think people are coming for our money, those kind of things, because you hear it when you're on those committees. And we are not the only ones in a precarious situation. There are other places. I think that's going to be one of the defining issues of the next 5 years, actually finance. Again, alluding to what Gavin said about the church commissioners, but dioceses are going to be in a sticky situation, many of them. I've spoken in 4 debates over the last 5 years. You'll find if you get onto General Synod that some people speak too much, some people don't speak enough. And so it's about how you just pitch it at the right level, not to annoy people. And then, of course, I've reported back at Diocesan Synod. We take it in turns as candidates to write reports. Please consider voting for me and making me your first preference. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. And then last but not least, we have Stuart Craddock. Stuart, when you're ready, please.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all across a crowded Zoom. Who am I? I'm a flawed priest who for 21 years has, I hope, strived to proclaim the good news of the gospel with, of course, guided and measured by some, I hope, important principles, those principles of inclusivity, of mutuality, of celebrating diversity and addressing injustice. A priest, I hope, who has creatively tried to encourage radical hospitality in our churches where we are and the communities in which we're set. I'm proud to be a leader of an inclusive church with people from a diverse range of socio and economical backgrounds, race, sexuality, and disability. I strongly believe in the mutuality across the whole of the Church of England, and that includes from the church commissioners down, and that parishes should, wherever possible, share financial resources and human resources. I'm a priest, I hope, who believes, like some others here, that it should not only be the parishes who can afford to pay for a parish priest who get one, but actually we as a church family look after each other. An interesting thing, when we went into the pandemic, I understand that the church commissioners offered dioceses a stipend holiday, but at a rate of 2.5%. Well, for me, that's just usury and wrong. I hope that we as a church celebrate diversity. I know my own spiritual identity, but I encourage and am encouraged by the breadth of expression within the church. I'm committed to us being a church which reflects diversity of the communities in which we are set and live and serve, but I know we need to do better at this. I hope that the church continues to address matters of injustice nationally and locally. And one of the ways in which we've tried to do that in Grantham is by establishing a homeless, emergency homeless centre for people who are homeless, a centre for people suffering from domestic abuse, and to address the issues of lack of funding.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to have to rudely cut you off there. We're going to move on to the first question this evening. Just bear with me while I display this on the screen. So this question has 2 minutes for each candidate to respond. It's a question posed by the question panel, and it is: how do you see the diocesan strategy, which is embodied in Resourcing Sustainable Church, brackets A Time to Change Together, feeding into the national vision of the Church of England being simpler, bolder and humbler? So this is a 2-minute question. I'm going to first ask Martin Taylor to respond. So just to repeat, how do you see the diocesan strategy as embodied in RSC, A Time to Change Together, feeding into the national vision of the Church of England being simpler, bolder and humbler? So Martin, gather your thoughts. 2 minutes, please, as a maximum, and when you're ready.
I think in one sense, as I said before about the finances, we're not the only diocese to be in the situation that we're in. Of course, we know our own situation because we go to Diocesan Synod and we see the crunch of the numbers. And to the extent to which we're starting to work out how we deploy clergy, how many clergy we can have, how we engage laity, how we encourage people to work in teams, and whether that's clergy working together, but lay teams working, how we train laity, how we mobilize the whole diocese, how we reshape our deaneries. I think that's something, we may be a little bit ahead. And I think over the next 5 years, this is one of the major things that we're going to see in all of the dioceses. So I think we will also see not only the restructuring of how dioceses do ministry, I think we'll see the restructuring of how the Church of England does ministry. I think we may see dioceses changing shape. We may not have 42, or we've got 42 dioceses, 43 dioceses at the end of this 5-year period, or we may have started a process of reshaping, just like we're reshaping our deaneries into 9 different areas or whatever of the local government areas. I think we may start to see the breakup of existing dioceses. I think that's some of the writing on the wall. So the simpler, bolder, humbler, it depends how you read that, doesn't it? Just like how do you read Resourcing Sustainable Church? What we do want to see is ministry that is sustainable, that local Christians take responsibility for resourcing, but also in partnership with those historic resources that come from a diocese or from church commissioners. So I think it's a debate that's going to be going on, and we need to be in the debate. I need to be in the debate, or whoever's elected needs to be in that debate representing our diocese, but in recognition of the shape of the whole church. So I'll just leave it there.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. And next, Sonja Baron, to comment on the same question, please.
Yes, I think I agree with what Martin says, but I think we're a bit ahead of what the National Church is doing. I think our resourcing sustainable church has begun to address some of these issues. I think the idea of being mission focused, the idea of being Christ centered, and that shaping all that we do in the diocese. I think that recognizing that idea of being humbler, recognizing that we haven't always got it right in the national church, but also recognizing that we haven't always got it right at local level. And I personally feel that the idea of being more collegial in the way that we are hoping to work together and getting rid of, personally, this is my personal view, trying to recognize, yes, there will be someone who takes the lead, but we are all working together, lay and ordained, and you would expect me as DDOV to actually say something like that. So I feel that we are very much in tune with the vision of simpler, humbler, bolder of the church at national level.
Thank you, Sonja. And next, for the same question, Stuart Craddock, please.
Thank you. I mean, RSC, I mean, one of my hopes for RSC is that it actually is about empowering a vision for the future at a local level. So about equipping people to go through a journey to be able to bring about radical change and growth potential. But how it feeds into the simpler, bolder, humbler, well, of course, if things are to be, if at a national level it's to make things simpler, well, that again should be about, I think, equipping clergy and local communities to make things better. But there's one paper coming to Synod, GS 2222, and a really amazing title, but that's actually the mission and pastoral measure. That's actually going to be pulling, some would say, the control and the self guidance of local communities better, rather from away from them to a central system, rather than being progressed at a local level. Humbler and bolder, I think there's a tension in that, isn't there? Of course, we need to be bolder in proclaiming the good news of Christ, but how do we do that humbly as well? There is lots of tension within it, but I think we need to hold the agenda and move forward so that the parish and our sacramental future is key to who we are as the Church of England.
Thank you, Stuart. And next, Aaron Beasley, please.
Thank you. So we've seen, I think, over the last year and a half, there's a real desire for us to be way bolder than the national church is prepared to be, and for us locally. But we're held back because of all the detail, all the things that we have to do to manage parish life. So, as others have said, there's a massive tension between wanting and meeting people and what needs to be done locally. And to run parishes here, and I know that this situation is the same elsewhere, the main message that I'm sharing with the people I meet is I'm running 7 heritage centres. Church comes way down the list, and we need to find a way together to get the business of maintaining and looking after buildings put to one side so that we can free ourselves up to go and talk about Jesus, to pray with people, because we've seen that children want it, and those who have ignored church for part of their life want it. But we're tied up in rules and regulations that the government and national church throw at us. There is a massive synergy between what we're trying to do in the national church. We're probably ahead of the game, but we're probably not being bold enough in what we're setting out to do. It's enough for now, but there's more to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. And Gavin Kirk, please.
Lincoln Diocese has a bit of a history in General Synod of being ahead of the curve in certain things and rather behind in others. And I think this question is one of those where we are way ahead of the curve, as indeed our peer reviewers told us last time they heard about the progress we've made. In ordained local ministry, for example, we took the lead, and I think we're going to, in terms of RSC, TT, CT, or whatever we're calling it, because the whole Church of England is in the same boat, particularly post-pandemic. Much of what we have been talking about and planning grows out of things like the Setting God's People Free agenda, and most of all, it's our wanting to make as many decisions as possible at grassroots level, which is revolutionary. We're not seeking to enforce a top-down answer across the whole Church of England. One of the things that we're going to have to fight against and guard against in General Synod is their one-size-fits-all approach, and frankly, their rather suburban view of church, and that just doesn't work in most of Lincolnshire. So things like the suggestion for the way the Archbishops are going to manage even more centrally needs trenchantly to be resisted, and I think that's one of the biggest contributions the Diocese of Lincoln can make in that.
Thank you. And next, Philip Brent, please. Philip, are you? Oh yes, you are there. Brilliant.
Yes. I think I agree with Gavin that in so many ways the Church of England on this issue is ahead of the game. The Diocese of Lincoln is ahead, but I do think that there is a driving factor from the centre. I again agree with Gavin. We need to watch the Archbishops are saying. I have some concerns about the programme that we're going. I don't think necessarily we are making things simpler. We might be making things more complicated by trying to contract deaneries into the municipal areas. That doesn't naturally fit in every area, and I'm concerned about that. I'm not sure we're bolder either, because I think there are a lot of people, certainly lay people in our parishes and deaneries, who are very concerned that they are losing a voice and that they are not being heard. So I think we need to be careful. To be humbler, we need to listen more clearly to what the lay people are saying. Hopefully that will happen as we move forward, but I think we need to be careful.
Thank you, Philip. And lastly, Jim Presswood, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think that there's nothing like a reduction of money or available money to focus the mind, and I think that's, whether that's the right or wrong driver, it's a driver, but I think that's a good place to be, because I think it forces us to be bolder, it forces us to be humbler, and it does force us maybe to be simpler. I think we can make better use of the resources we have, and the Resource and Sustainable Church, I think, looks to do that. How can we be more effective in utilising the different skill sets, the different charismata, the different gifts that people have, and apply them? We're all in the same team, and often we can get very parochial in the worst sense of the word. And so I think it helps us to lift our eyes up and look wider. And I think that's something that the wider Church of England could benefit from. It struck me at the most recent diocese and synod, as we were hearing about all the different food banks and all these great projects that have been happening during the pandemic, that that's great and to be celebrated at the local level, but there is a sense in which we've got hundreds of parishes right across this nation reinventing the same wheel, and if there's a way that we can find to centralise some of those projects and help people to deliver on the ground, and I think that's got to be a good thing as well. I think we can be bolder and humbler in terms of permission to fail. How do we create an environment where we can encourage clergy to sort of go for it and not be worried about ticking certain boxes, giving a permission to fail, because I think we need to be bolder in that and humbler to recognise that we won't get it right first time, that we don't need to after the launch of a project get it all right within 6 months, but some of these things will take time to embed. I think we can move beyond hopefully resourcing sustainable church to growing and a flourishing church as well.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. I have to cut you off there. Sorry about that. Right, so that's the first question. We're going to move on to the second question now, which has been received from Jackie Johnson, who is a licensed general preacher on the electoral roll. Given that the ongoing focus on clergy wellbeing initiated by the Clergy Covenant and the possible reduction in clergy numbers nationally and locally, would you share your reflections on what measures you believe need to be taken to better enable flourishing both for clergy and those in their households? This is another 2-minute question. I'm going to first, just the random order generator, I'm going to first come to Jim Presswood. Sorry, you've barely caught your breath. I will read the question out again. Given the ongoing focus on clergy wellbeing initiated by the Clergy Covenant and the possible reduction in clergy numbers nationally, would you share your reflections on what measures you believe need to be taken to enable flourishing both for clergy and those in their households? Jim, gather your thoughts, and then when you're ready, 2 minutes, please.
Lovely. I think, am I muted? Yeah, great. I think one of the things that's always struck me, and this was a point I made in my MDR actually, was that there's many professions that are kind of similar in some regards. So counsellors, for example, have compulsory supervision. Teachers get supervisory practice. So one of the things I'd love to see is that compulsory sort of, I don't know what you call it, pastoral supervision, or that go-to person that you can go and reflect with and offload some of the stuff in an appropriate way that is outside of the context, but is, like many other professions have, just a healthy way of supervision. I'd also like to see a bit more, and I know it's difficult within the structures, but some help with goal setting and what the plans you're making, someone to bring and help have some accountability on that, not to kind of tie you up in knots over whether you achieve it or not, but actually just reflective practice, someone helping you lift your eyes up from the day in, day out of the parish situation, and just kind of help keep refocusing you on why we all signed up for priesthood in the first place and the things that we believe God was calling us to do. So yeah, for me it's that layer of pastoral supervision that is missing.
Thank you, Jim. And next, Gavin Kirk, please.
I think facing what we are in terms of resourcing sustainable church and all that, we need to enable the clergy to concentrate on that for which they were ordained, which is to preach the word of God, to celebrate the sacraments of the new comfort, and to be a visible sign for Christ in their community. How do we do that? We need to encourage proper lay leadership to take the burden of administrative responsibility, which so often ends up on the clergy's shoulders, to be done by lay people. We need to find appropriate admin support for them in order that they can concentrate on what they were ordained for. And we need proper training for them as the model, the matrix of what it is to be a priest in the 21st century begins to change. Because we spend £100,000 preparing someone for the priesthood, and then it's perfectly possible to go through the rest of your life with almost no training thereafter. We've got to put the appropriate training and ongoing support in place for the clergy in order for them to grow and develop as human beings, as priests, and as the leaders that we're trying to grow.
Thank you. Thank you, Gavin. Stuart Craddock, please.
Well, I think, you know, there's some basic things which I'm grateful that the church is starting to address, and that's that clergy are, I believe, no longer treated like cattle moved from stall to stall, but actually there is some personal involvement in us as clergy, but I wouldn't want us to be as generally prescriptive as in parts of our terms of not employment, but you know what I mean, about the natures in which we should continue to grow and develop. But I do think that ensuring that spiritual direction, pastoral supervision, and addressing to continue to develop our own continued ministerial education is really, really important. But also about the security of our own homes as well. And about how we as a diocese, we as a church, look after not only the priests who sacrificially give themselves, but also of their families and as well, who move from parish to parish to enable their partner to be a priest in that particular location. So I think housing is really, really important, and the sense of security which comes from that.
Thank you, Stuart. Sonja Baron next, please.
Yes, thank you. I think I concur with quite a lot of what others have said. I think there's a very important point about accountability, about clergy being accountable to one another and accountable to others in order to ensure that they do look after themselves. Having been in 5 rural parishes before my current job, I know how easy it is to just allow yourself to be completely consumed and taken over by the things that come to you, because they really need to be done, and I'm the only one that can do it. So I think having some accountability and somebody who can be there for you to bounce ideas off and to be able to say to you, well, actually, there's some things you can leave, you don't have to do those. I think our chief pastors, our bishops, should actually give permission to clergy to look after themselves and to look after the clergy, to encourage them in what they do and to be there as much as possible at times of need. I think there is, I think having not long looked after, thinking about curates, I think curates need to be helped to understand the importance of well-being and flourishing, so that as they go into their own parishes to lead, they have got good habits. They've learned from others how to serve God in that, in a way that will help them flourish.
Thank you, Sonja. Aaron Beasley, please.
Thank you. I think the heart of looking after yourself, being able to flourish, is about having clear expectations. As we go to a new place, whether or not the role of priest is recapturing the past or being expressed differently, if we can say what the priest is meant to do, what the laity are there to do, and what the bishops are there for, and express the nature of those interrelationships, and putting aside some of the rules that get in the way at the moment, the nature of an office holder and then like running your own patch sort of in the way you want to, doesn't help with setting expectations and the oversight. I'm a spiritual director within the diocese, and it's mandatory to be part of a supervision group, and that is so empowering, because you know you've got to turn up. you're expressing your worries, concerns, your highs and lows, and it's in such a safe environment that you tend to leave on a high. You know, the cell groups that we may have come through training with that over time wither and die, but it's having the permission and the backup and the expectations set, and for people to enforce it with a gentle hand, not being heavy-handed with CMD and discipline measures that are not fit for purpose, and again, frankly terrifying if you go anywhere near them. Set expectations and stick to them.
Thank you, Aaron. We have unfortunately lost Philip Brent. His Wi-Fi has given up on his holiday. He's just emailed me to say he's unable to rejoin. So I'm going to go straight to Martin Taylor. Please, Martin, when you're ready.
Great, thanks. I think one of the things for well-being is remembering that clergy, like everybody, are embodied human beings, and therefore we need to teach people to rest. We need to teach people have a Sabbath, take a proper day off for rest and recreation that recharges our batteries. Make sure that we take regular holidays, and so that we're not overworking, so that we're working from rest, which is the principle that Jesus established for us. I think learning to create teams so that the vicar doesn't do it all, the rector, the priest, the pastor doesn't do everything. So if we think some of the major stresses that we've been listening to this evening, I think admin seems to come up regularly. I can't do everything, I've got all this admin to do, and it's stopping me from doing my ministry of word and prayer. If we're able to create or teach our clergy to create teams to do the admin in the parish, to create an office to do that for the parish, if we're able to, or an operations manager, all those kinds of things, over time, as lay people step forward to recognise actually we need to release our clergy to do that ministry of word and prayer and sacrament, and take responsibility for the operations of the church. That's something that will release our clergy and take strain off them. I think teaching people, as we've already said, to have proper boundaries, so we can say no to things because we have a greater yes. Yeah, what you're saying is a good thing, but I'm going to say no to it because I know what my priorities are, and this is what I'm going to do. I've got a greater yes. I think if we teach people to be part of networks that refresh them. So for me personally, I'm a member of New Wine, and I find going to New Wine conferences refreshing, whether I go for a day conference or whether I go for a week summer camp with my family or out with the church family. Those are just some of the things. And being an encouraging community, whether it's encouraging from senior leadership or encouraging from the church family.
Thank you. Well finished there. So now we're going to move on to the next question, which has been sent in by Georgie Mashel from Lovedon Deanery. Just share this now. In light of the Lament to Action document, there have been 25 reports on the subject in the last 36 years. As a General Synod rep, how would you ensure that these issues of racial inequality are dealt with by the Church in an effective and timely manner? This is another 2-minute max question. I'm going to come to Aaron Beasley first, and I'll just read through that question again. In light of the Lament to Action document, there have been 25 reports on the subject in the last 36 years. As a General Synod rep, how would you ensure that these issues of racial inequality are dealt with by the Church in an effective and timely manner? Aaron, gather your thoughts for a second, and then when you're ready, 2 minutes, please.
Having spoken about how we need a light touch with rules, I think this is somewhere where we need stronger leadership from our bishops, rather than allowing clergy to move around, and sometimes those unconscious bias and assumptions that are made about positions that might be suitable for one or another. I think the bishops need to take a role in helping clergy move into the right place and giving people a leg up, because sometimes we need a helping hand to undo the past and the prejudice. And when issues are spotted, we all need to step up to call each other out and deal with it swiftly, really swiftly, not with another long-winded report. So I think these are areas where fast action is required, and we need to help put people in the right place to get change. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And next, Sonja Baron, please. Sonja, when you're ready.
As a co-chair of the Anti-Racism Task Force, I think you would expect me to have quite a lot to say on this, but I'm not going to say too much. I think what there, as the question has said, there have been lots of reports, and there were 47 recommendations that came as a result of this report. And what it's done is that it has actually, unlike all the other reports, it has actually given a recommendation who should be responsible for its implementation and who should be responsible for monitoring and when it has to be done by. And I think that what we need to do, what I would encourage in the General Synod, is for every single diocese, every single person, every single clergy person to look at those recommendations and ask themselves, what one thing is it that I could take from this and implement? I think it's actually saying this is not another report. It is something for us. It's called From Lament to Action. And I think what we're asking the General Synod, what we're asking everyone to do, is to do something.
Thank you, Sonja. And next, Jim Presswood, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think the proposal, one of the proposals come out of those reports about a racial justice officer in every diocese, and I know there was, there was stuff around, well, whether it was the right model or whether they're given enough time to work it into the budgets, and either way, whatever the model is, that we make that a priority in each diocese, I think is key. Whether that's a full-time officer or more, or a team, or however it's constructed, but that we see that push through and keep that right on top of the agenda, I think is incredibly important, something that we should be pushing through at General Synod. I think there's some stuff around looking at training pathways, both from the point of view of do the routes into training, do the selection process, does the training itself discriminate in any way? Do we make sure that there's that issue of you can't be what you can't see? So how can we address that in a timely, urgent manner? But also from a training pathway point of view, in terms of what we look, as ordinands, what I never got anything on looking at the issues of race and racial injustice, and so how can that form a part of the programme, not just as ordinands training to be priests, but also ongoing continuing professional development. So we make sure it's not just a blitz of action because of what happened more recently in the news, but it's an ongoing embedded thing that we're constantly reviewing, constantly seeking. And I think really looking at how we embed that in our training process and our continuing training process is going to be really important as part of that. That's just two of the things that spring to mind instantly on that.
Thank you, Jim. And next I'm going to Stuart Craddock. Stuart, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. I think, if we as the church are expected to speak truth to the world, then we need to listen to the truth that is spoken to us and act. And there were lots of recommendations, as Sonja quite rightly said, that were taken to Synod, which the Anti-Racism Task Force brought to them, and they should be acted universally. The title "Lament into Action." Yes, we should move into action, but we should also continue to lament our failings in the past and be inspired by the love of a God which loves us and all people to act when we speak truth to ourselves and people from outside the church speak truth in a challenging way to us. Things need to change. As I've said before, we need to do better.
Thank you, Stuart. And next we move to Gavin Kirk. Gavin, when you're ready. You're on mute, Gavin, sorry.
This is a very carefully worded question, and I'm going to try and address it exactly as I understand it. If I fail to be as broad as you would like, please forgive me. This question, I think, is about how a General Synod rep holds the national church to account on this vital issue. And the key way that we do that is in question time, which is just like parliamentary questions, where you get to ask all the key players in national church questions, and you can hold them to account. They know the questions in advance, but you can then ask the first supplementary, which they don't know about. And that's the part of General Synod that most of the officers and the archbishops and co fear the most. So that's the first thing you've got to do, really focused and up to date in question time. You've got to ask for evidence of what the church is doing, rather than just listen to great presentations afterwards there are no questions, and fine speeches. And you can demand statistics as to how far this report is being actioned, and all General Synod reps should be pressing for those. You can also lobby the business committee to make sure that these issues are properly timetabled into the synod, and that the form of the matter being discussed allows for questions and comments. And I think we need to be lobbying ministry division and those responsible for the senior leadership pathway to make sure that these vital questions form part of the ongoing formation of the clergy of today and of tomorrow.
Thank you. And lastly for this question, Martin Taylor.
Thank you, Georgie, for this excellent question. I would hope that I actually model this. I nominated Sonja Baron because I believe that we should have black representation on General Synod. And I hope people vote for Sonja to be elected to General Synod, please do. I also nominated Jason Mahan, who's my church warden, who's from Sri Lankan background, to stand. And I also persuaded Amy Leotan, a Nigerian woman, to stand as a layperson. So I proposed 2 BME lay people and 1 clergy person to actually come forward for General Synod, because I believe this is absolutely vital for representation at General Synod. And I think it starts at home as well. I have had a West Indian woman as my church warden. I've got Jason Mahan currently as my church warden. On 2 Sundays ago, we had a Songs of Praise evening with testimony. 3 of the 7 were from other nationalities, other ethnic backgrounds, 1 Chinese, 1 Zambian, and 1 Sri Lankan again. So it's how you model to say everybody's equal, because when we stand before the throne on the last day, there will be people from every tribe and tongue and nation. And when it says nation, the word is ethne. It doesn't mean nation state, it means ethnic groups will be around the throne. So I want to see representation in General Synod with our own candidates. Please vote for them.
Thank you, Martin. And now we move on to our next question. This one has been sent in by Annabelle Barber from Westwall Deanery. So it's in sort of 2 sections. If members of General Synod were asked to vote on the following motion tomorrow, how would you vote and why? And the resolution she's described is: we recognise that Jesus' radical ministry of inclusion requires us to act radically as his people and include everyone as equals, including recognising and enabling the equal right of same-sex couples to Christian marriage. This is another 2-minute question for you all. I'm going to come to Gavin Kirk first, and then just that question again. If members of General Synod were asked to vote on the following motion tomorrow, how would you vote and why? We recognise that Jesus' radical ministry of inclusion requires us to act radically as his people and include everyone as equals, including recognising and enabling the equal right of same-sex couples to Christian marriage. Just stop sharing that. So in a moment, Gavin Kirk, when you're ready, 2 minutes, please.
I think that will be an unlikely motion before the General Synod, because I don't think the House of Bishops would allow the word Christian in front of marriage. I could be wrong. Colleagues on Synod can let me know what they think. I think there's a twofold answer to this question. The first is, as a national church, I believe that we have to recognise that same-sex marriage is a thing, and that we have a responsibility to find a way of blessing it. It seems to me that the easiest way of getting there is perhaps to do some more theology on what a Christian marriage is, and whether there's any distinction between a Christian marriage and a secular marriage. Given that marriage predates Jesus, I think there probably is a difference, and I would definitely vote to allow the blessing of same-sex unions in church, with the same caveats that the church has generally put in place for those who in conscience can't agree. But before we can vote on whether this can be Christian marriage, we need to have solved that thorny problem. So if it came in the form that Annabelle has put it, I would abstain, because I do want to be able to bless same-sex unions, but I don't think the Church of England as a whole, and certainly I don't think there's any appetite in the House of Bishops for redefining what we think we understand Christian marriage to be, and therefore it wouldn't get through the House of Bishops.
Thank you. And next, Stuart Craddock, when you're ready. 2 minutes, thank you.
Thank you. It's strange, isn't it? As priests, we can bless, and bishops can bless salt gritters. We can bless ramps. We can bless nuclear submarines, but we can't give God's blessing on two people who love each other, who happen to be the same sex. I would, like Gavin, question the wording of the motion, and alongside with the inclusion of the word Christian marriage. I agree entirely that actually same-sex unions should happen in church, and that the universal love of God in giving, and a priest giving a blessing and acknowledging the love of those individuals, and that love of an individual's is also a reflection of God's love, should be available to all people in church, as it is with our ecumenical brothers and sisters. Not all of them, of course, but some.
Thank you, Stuart. Aaron Beasley, please.
Thank you. Listening to what has been said previously about whether or not this question, this proposal would come as it is, to share my thoughts on whether I would vote for or against, I think for and against would lead to more division internally within our church in the way that it is set up, because it needs to be thought through. It would also lead to more division outside of this church if we're ever going to stand chance on any unity and coming back with our brothers and sisters in the wider church of God to just give a yes or no in the way that this is put in front of us. It is wrong. So I would abstain from this position. We need to find ways to bless love between people of all types. We also need to have a stronger position on the position where we have at the moment, where we are forced, obliged, what heterosexual relationships. The church has to do it because it's what we're told to do, we do not question that enough either. We need to prepare people for the state of coming together, and we need to stay with them for longer as well. I would abstain from this motion as it's presented.
Thank you, Lauren. Sonja Baron, please.
Well, Gavin is the experienced one on General Synod from what he has said about whether it's how it's worded and so on. I think we're still in a position where we're doing a lot of listening and the living in love and faith agenda that we're working through at the moment. I think for me, it's a difficult question because as to what I would vote, because as I would say that I agree with things as they are, as they stand, as marriage being between a man and a woman, as canon law states. But I'm also very conscious that it's important, as both Aaron and Gavin has mentioned, that people who are in same-sex relationships feel that they should be able to have a blessing in whatever way that it on their relationship. I think I would find, I don't know, I can't say what I would vote, whether I'd vote for or against. So I think I would be one of those that would abstain, because I don't think we've listened to each other enough. We haven't heard what each other have had to say enough yet. And I don't think that we want to cause division. So I think I would be also one that abstains.
Thank you, Sonja. Martin Taylor, please.
Thank you. I think we've got to, well, I think in terms of key virtues here, I would want to talk about the unity of the church before I talk about anything else, because this has the potential to bust the church wide open. So I think a key element to all of this is the unity of the church and the bond of peace. And how are we going to maintain and keep the unity of the church over this issue when people clearly disagree about it so passionately? I think the Church of England, as we know, is part of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And I don't think as a Church of England, we can legitimately change Catholic and Apostolic teaching based on people's experience. I don't actually think it's a matter of equality. I think it's a matter of theology, as has been raised in terms of what is marriage. And that's because I've got gay friends who are Orthodox and would completely hold a different view. They would say, look, I'm gay, but I think marriage is between a man and a woman. I think gay sex is wrong. I think we should bless gay relationships in that way. So I've got Christian friends, but it's called side B and side A. You've got side B Christians, gay men, gay women who say, I believe in the Orthodox position of the church, and we are letting them down hugely if we were to embrace such a motion that we've got in front of us there. So it's not a question of equality, it's a question of theology, getting our theology right first. Of course, the church needs to be welcoming to everybody. If you come to St. George's, I meet one-to-one with gay people, we have trans people in our congregation who come because we are the safest place in town for them to come. So it's not about inclusion or diversity, it is about theology and what marriage actually is, in my opinion. And I wouldn't vote for this motion if it came before the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And then finally, Jim Presswood.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I want to echo a lot of what various people have said. I think for me, you know, I am from a evangelical background, and so for me, that's always been in my the received wisdom, if you like, or otherwise that I've received. I therefore, I think for me the biblical understanding of marriage and how we define marriage, I would struggle to redefine that. I do think we need to find ways of blessing and encouraging, you know, monogamous, lifelong relationships, and finding ways to bless that. I think for me, I would struggle to know how to vote, if I'm completely honest right now, in terms of particularly the second bit around blessing, for all the reasons that others have mentioned around the unity of the church, around time to really think through the theology of this, a lot of the implications around this as well. I find myself probably in a position where my heart is sometimes in a different place to my head, and it's discerning whether is that my heart that's, or is it a prompting of the Spirit, and is it my head in terms of what I've received, or is that, you know, is there a correction that needs to happen to my theology? So that's personally where I am. I think the wording of the motion, I would, yeah, as others have said, I would abstain for all the reasons mentioned above. I don't want to sound like I'm sitting on the fence or fudging, but that's just personally where I am. I would, yeah, as I've understood it, the biblical understanding of marriage said to redefine marriage is the first thing I would have to struggle with, and I think the rest flows from that really. But yeah, and also just you know, I find it hard to answer in this kind of forum. I'm more than happy to chat it through with individuals as well, and I think that's often maybe a luxury we can't afford, and we can't keep affording. But
thank you. I gave you a 10-second warning, but was on mute. I do apologise for that. So I said that to myself. Right. So next question. This one is we've moved on to the last two sort of slightly more quick-fire questions. These ones will have a minute each before we finish. This is a question from the General Synod Hustings question panel. How best do you think the national church could use its significant financial resources to further the 5 marks of mission? This has been touched on already earlier, but a bit of an opportunity to extend that. I'm first going to call Sonja Baron in a moment, and I'll just read through that question again. How best do you think the national church could use its significant financial resources to further the 5 marks of mission? And Sonja, when you're ready, 1 minute, please.
Well, I think that I would say that the church is already doing some thinking, particularly about in looking at unjust structures, and looking at how we look after creation. I think the church has begun to make contributions towards that, and in particular the SDF funding. I think certainly one of the recommendations that we made was that any SDF bids should have within it, if there's no element of justice, racial justice in particular, then they would have to, they wouldn't be given the grant that they have asked for.
Thank you, Sonja. Sorry, we're out of time. There's going to be a bit of a step change now, moving to 1 minute questions. We're all used to 2. I'm next going to ask Martin Taylor on this point, please. 1 minute.
Okay, the significant resources of the church commissioners, the best way of using that money for 5 marks of mission is to put it into the training of priests. Simple as that. Because if we have well-trained priests releasing the laity to look after creation, to do evangelism and mission, well-trained priests who teach the word of God and who teach people and seek justice for themselves, that's the best way of getting the 5 marks of mission off the ground. Don't try and put it into other areas. Get good priests on the ground doing and releasing that in the laity. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. You only needed 30 seconds, yeah? Stuart Craddock, please.
Well, quite frankly, the church commissioners need to do a lot with the vast resources that they have, and they need to pump it back into the parish system to resource who we are now. And that, as Martin said, is to train and to nurture good priests, but it's also about setting God's people free and the whole people of God, and actually how we resource individuals and encourage them in their discipleship to proclaim the good news, to teach, to give in loving service, to tackle the unjust in the world, and to care for our creation. Push the money back into parishes and resource us on the front line.
Thank you, Stuart. Gavin Kirk, please.
We've got to lead by example, and those who've spoken already are absolutely right in what they've said. We need to form the clergy and lay ministers better. I think we need to spend a lot more money in resources so that more people know what it is we believe and what we believe that should mean we should be doing as a church. We need to be more willing to speak truth to power. And that's one of the things that General Synod can do, actually. An NEMCON vote in General Synod is widely reported upon in the national press if it's about something significant. But more than anything else, we have got to show the way. We've got to stop getting on every single bandwagon that's going and concentrate on the 5 marks of mission.
Thank you. Jim Presswood, please.
Yeah, I agree with all the above. I'd also want to add that I think we need to concentrate on growing younger. If you look at the trajectory of ages, and there's a missing generation, danger of being missing generations. Often those younger generations, that I find they're more prophetic than we are, whether they're Christian or not. They're good at speaking truth to power. They're much more environmentally concerned. What if we can, put resource into sharing the gospel with them, proclaiming, teaching, nurturing, and essentially setting them free. Paul was zealous before he was a Christian. He was even more zealous, but zealous for God once he became a Christian as well. And I believe we can do that with our younger generations if we can put a lot more resource into evangelism and the discipling of our younger generations.
Thank you, Jim. Aaron Beasley, please.
Thank you. I think it's as simple and as complicated as finding more people like me, funded locally, to teach, baptise all the kids, all the children in the parish, and bring them up so that they can believe and go around, as Jim said, being zealous for Jesus and what he's about. To teach them, baptise them, nurture them, grow them. All about children.
Thank you, Aaron. Now we're on the home straight now. We have one final question, which is supposed to act as a bit of a mop-up for candidates if there's any item that they would really like to speak about that hasn't already been brought up. So just bear with me. We have limited time, and there are many other areas that could have been covered this evening. So other than what's been raised by the questions already this evening, what is the main issue that you think General Synod should be considering over the next 5 years, and why? This is another minute question. I'm going to call Stuart Craddock first. So that's, we have limited time this evening, so we want candidates to have the opportunity to raise anything that hasn't already been covered by tonight's questions. What is the main issue you think the General Synod should be considering over the next 5 years, and why? And that is a minute question. So Stuart, when you're ready, please.
Well, that's thrown into the deep end, isn't it? I think the Church of England has got to the position where actually we need to re-establish ourselves as the Church of England. And it needs to be one which is from the ground up, recognizing that huge privilege that we have, that every part of this country is served by a Christian presence. And it's about re-engaging that, reinvigorating that. It's about maintaining and offering our sacramental identity in a confident, joyful, and I forget the other word of the diocese, way. But it's about re-engaging, refocusing ourselves in courage and bravery and in the steadfast love of God.
Thank you. And next, Aaron Beasley, please. 1 minute.
So in 5 years, if it was possible to remove from parishes the burden of maintaining buildings, to allow us to focus on finding the children, to teach them, to bring them up, and as the generations move through the system, we will have people that believe in Christianity. As others have said, we are a Christian nation that just needs to rediscover that. We need to re-evangelize, but take away the management of the buildings, lighten the load there so we can focus on what will make a difference here. I don't need a big church to grow the number of disciples here. It helps to have a place, but I don't need it.
Thank you, Aaron. Sonja Baron, please. 1 minute, thank you.
Yes, I think I would go with the vision for the 2020s about recentering and coming back to the basics of our faith, how we live it out in everyday life, and enabling the gifts of all to be used, and for everybody to be enabled to flourish in the mission and ministry that God has called them to.
Thank you, Sonja. Gavin Kirk, please.
I think the biggest challenge not mentioned so far is the restoration of the church's confidence, because it's taken a huge knock in the last 2 years, in the last 20 years, quite frankly. And, we believe that we are a divine society, called by God and empowered by him. And I would like to see us grow in confidence about talking about Jesus and his saving love and what he has to say to the world today. And I would like the church to concentrate upon equipping each of its members to be a better disciple.
Thank you. Jim Presswood, please.
Yeah, I think, how do we go about proclaiming the gospel afresh to the next generation, to the current generations we have? What does that look like? It's great, we've got loads of focus on schools and Board of Education stuff, but what's the next steps from that? How do we work with our young people? Do we even know what our young people are struggling with, where the gospel touches them, and how we go about proclaiming that, and how we can be a church that's more agile, so that when the Spirit leads and it looks like there's something happening, that we can come in behind that, rather than having to go through overly long-winded, over-involved processes to see a new community birthed. I think you're still muted, Helen.
Been doing so well. Martin Taylor.
So I think for the church to be truly diverse, to reach the whole nation, we need also to reach white working class communities on our outer estates, kind of a bit of a Burnley drum, if you like. So that's what if we want to be truly diverse, we need to reach everybody in the nation and not be a club for middle class, middle-aged and older people. That's what I'd say.
Thank you, Martin. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much for the electorate that are with us this evening, and a huge thank you to the candidates who have finished their first Zoom hustings, I think. I really appreciate your time. This video will be up for anyone who wants to view it from about tomorrow lunchtime. And there's a lot to think about for those electorate that are here, and also people who will be watching on YouTube who are yet undecided. The vote will close on midnight on the 8th of October for portal voters, and midday for those few that are voting by post. So thank you again to everyone. And I think to close the meeting, Shall we make a bit of a racket and unmute ourselves and say the grace together? So I will just unmute us all now. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ,
the love of
God,
God,
fellowship of the Holy Spirit, be with us evermore. Amen. Amen.
thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.